What is up, people? The season is right around the corner, and I think it's time we talk about some quarterbacks. Last year's quarterback class was really, really underwhelming. You had names like Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, but this year, it's just completely loaded with elite talent at quarterback. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about some of the best quarterbacks coming into this year and the quarterbacks that you should be watching out for. If you like this video, you already know, hit the subscribe, hit the like button. I do appreciate it. Now let's start with the obvious. You got Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. Obviously, Bryce Young wins the Heisman, throws for 4,800 yards, 47 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Beats Georgia in the SEC championship and just couldn't get it done in the SEC title game when the wide receivers went down. I expect him to have an extremely productive year, especially piggybacking off of last year and having some new wide receiver talent come in there. CJ Stroud threw for 4,400 yards, 44 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Same for him, really. I mean, just elite quarterback play. These quarterbacks are just really good at managing the offense, reading a defense, and making plays and the big throws when they need to. So, obviously, these are the two off the top of the head that you just really go after, and you know that they're just penciled in. But also Hendon Hooker from Tennessee. Hendon Hooker had 31 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. And we're kind of the reason we say the touchdown to interception ratio is because it's just important to not turn the ball over and to score touchdowns. Let's just be honest. So all these three quarterbacks really, really good at doing that. Now, one sleeper that people aren't really talking about is Devin Leary. Devin Leary threw for 3,400 yards last year from NC State and 34 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. And like I said, the ratio, Devin Leary is very, very underrated in my opinion, and it's just because it's NC State. But if you watch any of Devin Leary throw, he has probably one of the best back shoulder deep throws that I've seen in a long time. He reminds me of Kyle Trask just with an arm. So very underrated in my opinion there. Now, one of the most underrated quarterbacks coming into this season is Malik Cunningham. Malik Cunningham threw for 2,900 yards last year, 19 passing touchdowns, 20 rushing touchdowns. That accumulates to 39 touchdowns total for Malik, and only threw 6 interceptions. If you watch how this guy plays, he does have a pretty weird throwing motion, but uh, he's pretty accurate with it, and he's lethal, absolutely lethal with his legs. I mean, like I said, 20 touchdowns with your on the ground as a quarterback is just insane. Being at Louisville with not much talent around and one of your leading receivers, Tyler Harrell, doesn't help going into the year. But Malik Cunningham really he's just really like a Lamar type. And I know that kind of sounds weird and maybe it's a little bit overhyped, but Lamar Jackson just played the exact same way. He's got a weird throwing motion. He's very mobile. He runs all over people and can still throw the ball. But yeah, it just is what it is. I think he's one of the most underrated quarterbacks as far as the numbers that he can produce this coming into this year. So Caleb Williams, as a freshman, took over for Spencer Rattler last year, kind of took his job from him. Spencer Rattler kind of wasn't the best sport, but Caleb Williams made some elite plays last year and won a lot of games for Oklahoma. Not that Oklahoma was supposed to win. Came back against Texas in one of the best Red River rivalries that we've ever seen. So Caleb Williams going to do really, really well, I think, but it is going to be interesting to see him move across the country to Southern Cal and see how he gels with the new receivers. Obviously, he brought a receiver or two with him and got some transfers in Jordan Addison from Pitt. So I think Caleb Williams is going to be really good this year. I also think Spencer Rattler will be really good this year. That being said, South Carolina doesn't have very much talent. Receivers are just kind of okay. O-line just kind of okay. Defensive line pretty strong. Other than that, the rest of the team just kind of okay. And that's as far as talent goes. Now, Beamer is a good coach, so I expect him to get a good bit out of him. But Rattler, I do believe, is a little bit underrated and overhated at this point. But him being on a less talented team kind of can humble him, and maybe we'll really see how he does. Like I've said at the beginning of this video, there's a ton of really talented quarterbacks, and a lot of them have moved around the country just this past offseason. So it's just going to be that much more interesting to watch and see what happens with a lot of these quarterbacks. And then you got KJ Jefferson, 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, threw for 2,600 yards, which is not really eye popping, but he does manage the offense very, very well. He's like a bowling ball. He will run it right down the middle and run straight through you. A little bit Tebow-esque, but obviously he's got the SEC's leading running back core coming back, and obviously Sam Pittman's O-line is always really, really good for them. So KJ Jefferson is a really good quarterback coming back. Another sleeper, not really a sleeper, but people forget Will Rogers threw for 4,700 yards last year. That's almost 5,000. You throw for 5,000 yards. I mean, you're considered an elite quarterback. But Will Rogers, Obviously, he throws the ball, 50 times a game, but with that being said, still a decent touchdown to interception ratio, and Will Rogers is a really good quarterback, and I expect Mississippi State to do something with him this year. This one's going to be a little bit controversial, especially with Miles Brennan just pretty much retiring from football without winning the starting job. But you got Garrett Nussmeier and Jaden Daniels, the transfer from USC at LSU. It's going to be really interesting to watch these two quarterbacks play. Brian Kelly does like to play two quarterbacks, so I do expect to see both of them. So that's going to be very interesting. Phil Jurkovec coming back from Boston College. Really, really underrated quarterback. He missed the whole season last year. Let's see if he can pick up where he left off. But Phil Jurkovec was a very good quarterback before he got injured. And then one of mine, Aiden OConnell. Aiden OConnell, very, very underrated. I mean, Purdue and Aiden OConnell threw for over 500 yards on Michigan State and Tennessee. Threw for over 500 yards. I just said 500, right? Yeah. Threw for over 500 yards on both of those teams. So he definitely has the potential. He does have wide receivers. But what I will say about that is he lost, I think, 400 pass attempts in receivers last year. So for all the receivers that he lost, I think, which was two, he lost over 400 attempts. So he's gonna need to find some new targets back there. But Aiden OConnell is a little bit underrated to me, and like I said, 500 yards on Michigan State and Tennessee, which are horrible secondaries, but it is just to be noted. He is a very good quarterback. Now, this one for me is a little bit biased. JJ McCarthy. JJ McCarthy has really, really good highlights for when he did get into the game. Obviously, he struggled a little bit with injury last year, and Cade McNamara was above him. Cade McNamara, a lot more of a game manager. And Cade McNamara took him to the playoffs, so you can't really argue with it. But JJ McCarthy, obviously the quarterback with the highest ceiling, the more potential, and can lead them to really, really offensively explosive plays. So JJ McCarthy is kind of just on my watch list. I think he could be a very, very good quarterback. And interestingly enough, the Ole Miss quarterback controversy: Luke Altmaier versus Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart and Keaton Slovis, both five-star quarterbacks that went to USC and transferred out. It's going to be interesting to watch because a lot of people that I'm hearing are saying Luke Altmaier might be the starter, and then a lot of other people I'm hearing saying Jackson Dart is really showing out. So that one's going to be interesting to watch. Could be like a LSU situation where they play both quarterbacks. And if you remember when Matt Corral came in for his first year, Matt Corral or Lane Kiffin played Matt Corral and John Rice Plumlee for a majority of that season. So whether it was wide receiver, wildcat, that's going to just be interesting to watch there. And then you got Tyler Van Dyke at Miami. Tyler Van Dyke started only 9 games last year, but threw for 2,900 yards, 26 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, which is a hell of a ratio, like I've been saying. It's going to be interesting to see if he can keep that going just because of the scheme is going to be changing. Mario Cristobal is kind of a run-first kind of coach, but just curious to see if he'll be able to put those stats up and have the opportunity to throw the ball. I'm sure that he will, especially if he plays anything like he did last year as a passer. So, but you do look back to Justin Herbert, how he's excelling in the NFL now as a passer, and he never really did at Oregon. And just at Mario Cristobal's teams at Oregon and how they run the ball kind of all over people, develop a strong offensive line and defense and all that. But anyway, just an interesting thing to think about. But Tyler Van Dyke definitely going to be one of the top ones to watch this year. And lastly, I didn't pull up any stats on this because I just didn't want to. But Casey Thompson from Texas and Quinn Ewers from Texas. Now, Quinn Ewers is going to be the quarterback at Texas. It was named he was the starter today. It's going to be very, very, very interesting to see how he plays. And with Hudson Card really right on his heels, both of those quarterbacks at Texas are going to be really interesting to watch this year. Texas has suffered a plague of injuries as of lately, and it's really kind of dismantling their season or people's hopes of their season. So, that being said, Casey Thompson at Nebraska, he transferred. Casey Thompson was not a bad quarterback, despite what anybody thinks. You can look at Texas' record 5-7 from last year. You can look at that all day if you want to, but you're not going to sit here and tell me that Casey Thompson was a bad quarterback. Now, was he amazing? No, but is he an upgrade over Adrian Martinez at Nebraska? Absolutely, and it's absolutely what Nebraska needs. So that's going to be another interesting one to watch. And I'm kind of going all across the nation here, trying to find the quarterbacks that have moved around and just let you know where they are now, because a lot of people just don't know. People that haven't watched, paid attention in the offseason or anything like that, these quarterbacks and coaches have moved. Cam Rising threw for 2,400 yards, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Cam Rising started a little bit earlier in the year. He wasn't the starter for a few games, and Utah had a few losses because of it. But when Cam Rising came into the game for Utah, when he was the full-time starter. Utah started winning games, and the offense just completely ran a totally different way, just much better. The O-line obviously helps Cam Rising and his running backs, but Cam Rising on third down, let's say it's 3rd and 7, Cam Rising usually makes something happen, whether it's with his legs or with his arms. Now, his stats aren't eye-popping, but Cam Rising, like I said, he's just a playmaker. He makes something happen when the team needs it. So Cam Rising's going to be a really, really interesting one to watch this year. And then we got JT Daniels. JT Daniels went from Southern Cal to Georgia and now to West Virginia. Discarding Southern Cal, when JT Daniels was at Georgia, JT Daniels was pretty much throwing for 400 yards a game on almost anybody. JT Daniels, for being a pocket passer, is really just elite as a passer. Now, he does need good wide receivers around him. George Pickens was his primary target. He loved throwing deep to him, but it's going to be really interesting to see him at West Virginia. West Virginia, in my opinion, their O-line is a little bit suspect, and obviously he's not the most mobile quarterback. So I do hope that he plays well, and it just makes it that much more interesting to watch. So JT Daniels is definitely another big one to watch this year. Now, a few honorable mentions. I wanted to say DTR, Dorian Thompson Robinson from UCLA. He had games where he played very, very well last year, and a few games where he struggled too. So, but I'm looking out to see if he actually improves and plays a full, solid season this year. That would be important. I've got Ty Thompson on here from Oregon. If he's going to be the starter over Bo Nix, that's going to be interesting to watch. And speaking of Bo Nix, can Bo Nix finally pull something together after being out of Gus Malzahn's system and out of Auburn and out of all the hate and criticism? Can Bo Nix finally put something together? Well, if he can win the starting job, then maybe we'll see. So that's left to be determined. Now, obviously, Anthony Richardson from Florida, that's a big one for me, just because I'm a Florida fan. But this kid really has a lot of potential. Anthony Richardson has one of the highest ceilings in college football. We just have to see it being played out for a full 4 quarters and consistently throughout the season, and we have to see him stay healthy. That's the most important part of all this. So Anthony Richardson, really, really high on my list, but I can't put him as a top quarterback of yet. He's one of my watch and see type of quarterbacks. And then Keaton Slovis at Pitt. Keaton Slovis, his first year at Pitt, he or at USC, he played amazing. Can it translate to Pitt? Pitt has a pretty decent offensive scheme, obviously with Kenny Pickett leaving, but Pitt does lose their offensive coordinator. So we're going to have to watch and see how he does too. That's just one of the more interesting quarterbacks to watch this year. Lastly, Peyton Thorne and Jalen Reed. Jalen Reed, the wide receiver, and Peyton Thorne from Michigan State. They were a seriously, seriously good duo last year. And then you couple that with Kenneth Walker. That's why Michigan State had just such a really amazing offense. If Peyton Thorne needed a touchdown, he could just throw it up to Jalen Reed, and he would damn near always come down with it. So he's one of the ones I'm going to be watching this year. We'll see how Michigan State does without Kenneth Walker. So that's just interesting there. Alrighty, and so that is my list of the top quarterbacks coming back, and some honorable mentions, and just some of the best quarterbacks that I think are going to emerge, and the ones that we should be watching out for this year. Quarterback, obviously, the most important position on the field, so it deems necessary to pay full attention to how some of these quarterbacks play, especially from where they come from. A lot of them transfers out, and like I told you at the beginning of the video, a ton of QB talent that's going to be going to the NFL this year. So just very, very interesting, very interesting. So anyway, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if I'm looking past anybody, or if you think that somebody I mentioned is too overrated, too underrated, things of that nature. But I do appreciate y'all watching, and I'll see y'all, man.